There's a lot of things that leaders do wrong. And one of them is not setting clear expectations for their team, the people that work for them. It's astounding to me how many people will walk into a new job as a leader and basically say absolutely nothing. I'm going to introduce you to a guy who's made an art form out of it. He shared with me something he did in his prior employment, which we'll talk about, which I feel is absolutely brilliant. And so today we're going to be talking about setting expectations with your employees, with or your team or whoever they happen to be, with my great friend Tom Dorl.
Welcome to the Value Bridge podcast by Aegis 360 Consulting. Our goal is to connect visionary leaders with down-to-earth insights to bridge the gap between leadership, culture, and strategy. While we learn, we will laugh and offer a roadmap for navigating the complex world of business. Enjoy and learn with guests that have been there and done that in uncovering strategies, triumphs, and challenges.
Tom, welcome.
Hi, Ned. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, buddy. So we always start the Value Bridge podcast with a couple of little questions. I only got one for you. It's kind of an easy one. It's a softball. The hard ones come at the very end. Something you've done that you would not wish on anyone.
Something I've done that I would not wish on anyone. Probably try. I was stationed in Iceland and I tried rotting shark.
Oh my, no.
If I remember correctly, kind of like they take the shark, they bury it in the ground like kimchi, and then they take it out and they eat it, and it's not good.
Okay. So eating rotting shark, you would not wish on anyone.
Yeah, no. I mean,
okay, all right, and you would never do it again. Clearly.
Never's a long time,
right?
So, but
my wife says the word never and always are bigger than I am. I should not use them.
That she's a smart woman.
She is a very smart woman. She really is. All right, down to business. Tom, you were you spent a career in the Air Force. You retired a colonel. I believe you were the group commander, correct? Was your last assignment?
That was my last ops assignment, yeah. And then I went to the staff.
Yeah, your last ops assignment.
Correct.
And just for our audience, can you give us a sense of a group commander, the size of the job in the form of people and whatever, but not budget maybe in dollars, but whatever you would call a budget in the military?
Yeah, sure. And again, thanks for having me on. So group commander in the Air Force, the squadron is the basic fighting unit, and squadrons can range from any size from 35 up to a couple of hundred. And then the next level of organization is a group, and a group is 3 or 4 squadrons, sometimes more, and then a wing and so on and so forth. And a group commander, usually run by a colonel in 06. And the group that I led was the 347th Rescue Group out of Moody Air Force Base, Georgia. And inside that group, there was 4 squadrons. There was a helicopter squadron. So that's what I was most experienced in, flying HH-60s. And then we had an HC-130J squadron. So those provided air refueling. They provided insertion, extraction, resupply for really the 3rd squadron, which was the Guardian Angels. So that's pararescue, SEER specialists, and support. So they were the team members that rode in the back of the helicopter or in the back of the C-130 and jumped in and inserted themselves to save somebody behind enemy lines. And then the 4th squadron, rounding out the group, was our support squadron. So they ran everything from life support, intel, taking care of all of our equipment that we were using, that were airdropping or things like that. And then I had a small staff to help me kind of run that. So I had 4 squadron commanders. So those are folks in the 15 to 17 year time frame. And then total about 450 in this group. And again, that's probably small to average. Some groups have 800, 1,000 folks. And then what we did is we provided on-demand worldwide combat search and rescue and personal recovery to the Department of Defense, wherever, both in combat and in civilian operations, such as hurricane relief.
So 400 to 500 employees, basically.
Correct.
Staff members.
Yep. And that was airmen and civilians as well, and contractors.
Oh, airmen, civilians. Okay, interesting. And so you had leaders leading leaders leading leaders. I mean, all the way down to individual contributors. You had the entire level.
Exactly.
how many direct reports would a group commander of this size have?
For me, I had 4 squadron commanders, so I'd say 4 squadron commanders, a deputy chief, probably up to 10 is about what I recall. Yeah.
All right. So you shared with me a couple of years ago, and you're probably sick and tired of hearing me talk about it, but it's one of those things that you come across in a professional career and you go, holy crap, this is astounding. And it was a letter that you sent to, I don't know if that was all 400 or if it was just your group or whoever, but you sent it out to a group of your staff, whatever that size was. And you went down probably the clearest and cleanest breakdown of different topics, from trust and accountability and just a whole variety of things in a memo or a letter format. And it, first of all, it was extremely well written, but beside that, it was just crystal clear. So could you just briefly talk about that? And how did you wake up one morning in a fit of total brilliance and get out of bed and write this? Or was it stuff you learned and stole from others and cobbled together and then penned your name to it because it's now yours?
Yeah, it's a confluence of everything you just said, Ned, and more. So I wish I could say I had the Jerry Maguire moment where I woke up in the middle of the night and I penned the whole thing of how we should treat clients and things like that. That came a little bit later, but if we back up, when I was a squadron commander, and I led a squadron out of Las Vegas flying HH-60s, and we did a lot of work in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's, and I had a lot of good mentors along the way, but really where it kind of clicked with me was a couple places and a couple links that held this chain of expectation dynamics together. And I was challenged, I think, as a squadron commander to say, what's your leadership philosophy? You better write it down. Okay. I think we have it, but until you write something down, it really doesn't become codified and really well thought out. And then after my squadron command, I went to the Air Force Academy where I was a cadet group commander. So I had 10 squadron commanders, about 1,000 cadets. And there was a really wonderful leader. He was a 1-star general, special operations background. He taught us about expectations. He came in and he wasn't an academy grad, so a little bit of an outsider for that dynamic, which was great. His expectations of us, the group commanders and everybody else working for him, was probably about 4 pages, which was very surprising and interesting. And so that's kind of, him and I formed a, obviously a professional relationship, but a personal relationship. And I asked him, I said, hey, as I'm going to group command, can I borrow some of this information? And he's like, yep, sure. He goes, where do you think I got it from? He basically picked it up along the way, right? And I said, well, boss, I gotta ask your permission because it's not my original idea. And so with that, that's really where, and when I went to group command, so now I'm a colonel and I'm commanding commanders and leading leaders and things like that. I really wanted to codify what I expected of them, what they expected of me, and things I liked and things I didn't like. And then one thing that they taught us in the Air Force is when you take command, they do the ceremony. It's very, formal. There's a passing of the guidon, and then the old commander leaves and he or she goes away. And then the new commander, you set the tone. And I was always taught, and I've used in the past of, okay, you have the ceremony in the morning and in the afternoon, you do a commander's call, kind of set the tone. Because in our community, we knew everybody, but you change over time, and there's a lot of folks I didn't know. And so now to kind of directly answer your question, I had the change of command, and then I had all the group come together. So who wasn't deployed or out on a training mission or anything like that. And I basically tried to keep it under about 30 minutes, and I emailed a letter out to everybody, and I said, this is the only thing we're going to talk about. And I projected it up on the screen, and I said, here's what you can expect of me. Here's what I expect of you. And then in addition to that, I put some things in there about what I call leadership spins or special instructions. And I said, hey, here's some things, just some of my leadership thoughts, things I've liked that I have learned that have worked well in the past. And that really kind of set the point of departure because I think if the folks working for you don't know how you think, what you're about, kind of where you are on a lot of things, and that wasn't issue by issue, it was more just broad strokes, then they can't get to know me and I can't get to know them, because at the end of the day, whether we're flying combat missions or making widgets or building cars or whatever, it's the people that get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of my attempt and my setting the stage to connect with them.
And how did they receive that? What kind of feedback did you get from your young captains and majors working for you, or in some cases, butter bar lieutenants that didn't know their butt from third base? How did they look at that? And did it resonate with them? Did they go, "Wow, I get who the old man is now," or what? I mean, and by the way, for listeners who aren't, I was in the military. For listeners who don't know, the term "old man" in the military is the boss. That's like it's just one of those terms. It's just, I don't know. It's not a term of criticism or anything. It's the term of the boss. So just for our listeners. But what did they think now about the new old man in the job there?
Yeah. It's not a pejorative. It's a position of respect in some ways.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So, and I try to. And so imagine yourself. I'll kind of give the scenario to your listeners and watchers, is that you're in an auditorium. It's in the afternoon. It was in May, so it's probably hot. It's Southern Georgia. Like, who's this guy? I mean, when I was a young guy, I didn't want to listen to the 06 either. So I kind of try to put myself in their frame. So try to keep it short and simple. And I said, hey, you're going to get this ahead of time. And so I kind of outlined it. I don't like to read line by line, but I said, hey, I want you to read this first block. And it wasn't PowerPoint. It was literally the letter projected on the screen.
Oh, okay.
And
wow.
so,
right.
One of the things I said, I pulled something out like attitudes are contagious, which is one of the things I said, they're good or bad, and they're contagious. So if you're showing positivity versus negativity, people are going to latch onto that. And I try to give them some context around it. And then what I like to do, instead of being up on stage like Patton, the movie Patton, which is a wonderful scene, but that's not really, in my view, that's not really leadership in some respects. I try to kind of walk and connect with folks, make eye contact, and frankly, try to put some folks that I know personally on the spot and just go, does that make sense? Do you have any questions? Some folks asked some questions, but a lot of them didn't. But we kept, what it did is it gave me something tangible and formalized and produced that they knew from basically day 1, hour 5 of command, going, this is what the boss thinks. This is what he likes. This is what he doesn't like. But it's not locking us into a rigid robotic framework. So let's have a conversation. Let's have a discussion. And we can get more into that of why I set the tone and where that was coming from. And so, and really one way is to mentor the younger folks, because at some point the squadron commanders will be colonels and they'll be in my position. And hopefully some of that stuck with it.
What's interesting about something you said a minute ago was when we think about setting expectations, I think the automatic default position is, I'm the leader. This is the expectation. I have a view. But then you added something to that as you were opening up, and you said, this is what you can expect from me. And I really like that. And I would like you to expand on that piece of it a little bit.
I'm just looking at the letter that I wrote, and because majority of it is what I expect of you, right? Because frankly, those are the young men and women, contractors and civilians. They're doing the work. They're the expert. I mean, I used to be the expert of flying the helicopter, doing whatever, but I'm old, I'm cranky, right? Things have changed. Technology there's things called cell phones now, and things like that. But really what it was is that I wanted to, what they could expect from me is I will give them my intent and guidance. And here's an example, sometimes in organizations, the boss wants this. Okay, well, did anybody ask the boss? And we've probably all seen stories of, the boss comes over to the factory, to the shop, to the warehouse, or even to the squadron or down in the maintenance barn or whatever, and says, man, I really like blue. And everyone's like, holy cow, we got to paint everything blue. Yeah. Well, you can, but maybe you shouldn't. So why don't you just ask me? So I would always try to start off at a lot of things going, this is what my end state is. Here's the intent. Y'all figure it out. So, and part of that was because one thing we'd like to talk about in our rescue circles is it was a triad, right? We had the helicopters, we had the fixed wing, and then we had the guardian angels. But I say it's really a triad of doing it, but we always tend to forget about number 4 and number 5. And number 4 would be the support squadron, because they have to pack the parachutes, do the rigging, but then also is the maintainers, because I didn't own the maintenance. So I was relying on another 06 who had 2,000 airmen running, fixing the airplanes and the jets and the helicopters and stuff like that. And then the other couple of other things is I wanted to be their advocate for their mission, if they needed something for their airmen and their families. Because a colonel can get a lot further on a phone, or I can call my neighbor who's like the med group commander or maintainers or something like that.
Right.
And then lastly, kind of 4 things would be to lead them, to mentor them, to guide them and coach them. And I left it open-ended like that for a couple reasons, because there's an infinite number of situations and scenarios. I could never put them all on there, but really to give them a framework and open that conversation of giving them my intent, my guidance, and then the advocacy. And usually by the time it got to me, it probably passed through a couple layers and levels. And I was able to affect some real change because I knew all the colonels. I usually knew the folks on the staff. And so that's kind of how I framed it with what they can expect of me.
By doing that, whether people recognize it or not, you're putting yourself on the line. I mean, I'm putting myself out there. You can expect that I will follow up with you if you have a question. Then I don't do it. Now I've let them down, right? After I told you that's something you can expect. So it's holding yourself accountable before you even take the first step.
Yeah. And this is one thing I say I professionally stole from that one mentor at the Air Force Academy. He mentioned, and it was in his letter, and that's one of the lines I asked if I could borrow, and his comment was, I am responsible for everything that happens in this organization and everything that doesn't happen. And I'm like, boss, I don't get that. And he goes, well, think about this. If I set the tone and we set the mission and it fails, that's, then it's on me. But also if we forget to do something, or we have a mistake or a slip or just fraud, I have set the culture and tone for that organization, so I'm responsible for it. And there were times where, I told the squadron commanders, I said, you guys got to hold me accountable to this. And I'll tell you, my support squadron commander, she was wonderful. She had flown special ops, and she's out now and doing great things. But she was really good about seeing my blind spots. And her building was right next to mine that was connected. And she would come in and she'd like, boss, she'd come in, shut the door. And I'm like, uh-oh, here it comes. And she was like, I'm really nervous. I'm like, oh gosh, is everybody okay? Sure. Hey, look, I just got to tell you something. Here's where you're seeing, but what you don't see is over here. And I was like, really? She goes, yeah, it's not good. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I felt, convicted because I didn't see that problem. But then the other flip side of that coin, Ned, was I felt really relieved because I think I set the culture where she felt vulnerable enough and trusted me enough. She'd come in and say, hey, boss, boy, I got to tell you, your left flank or right flank, it's a mess. But here's an idea to fix it.
Mm-hmm. So, you've just demonstrated one of those key components that I think is really important, and that is you can learn a lot about leading from the people you lead if you just listen. And I'm one that will tell you humility is far overrated. I think we push it too hard. I really do. I mean, I'm very serious about that. I think we oversell humility. But then that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a good place, and that in this example, the humility to listen and learn, I think, is one thing we don't sell enough of, right? If I just shut up and listen to someone else, they've got a brain in their head. It clearly works because they were able to open the door and walk in and get wherever they've gotten. They've got thoughts. They have information. We need to stop and listen to them for just a little bit. And you kind of illustrate that with that story. And you also illustrated it in the letter you put out. Come talk to me. Tell me, report. Let me know what's going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. In that letter, we've got expectations, things I like, wake up criteria, that sort of thing. And I have a little section towards the end. It's called Leadership Spins. And SPINS is an acronym for special instructions. And we use that in combat, going, okay, do this, don't do that. And I have this belief, leadership by the numbers, very simple, 1, 2, 3, 4, and number 2 is listen more than you talk. And I'm not the genius who came up with it, but you got twice as many of these and one of those. So the ratio probably should be 2 to 1. And lastly, I've really never learned much by talking.
Well, yeah, no, because we can only say what we already know.
Right.
Yeah, I can't say things I don't know because I don't know it to say it. So, yeah, exactly. Well, Tom, we're getting about at the halfway point. So I kind of break up the conversation a little bit.
Oh, boy.
And we kind of go off course just a tad. So you got 3 selections. I want to know which one you're going to select.
Like,
you ready?
Door 1, 2, or 3?
Yeah, but it's wine, bourbon, or a draft. Those
are my choices?
Those are your choices, yeah.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah, sure. This isn't a game show, so
okay,
yeah, that's fine.
I just want to make sure. So are we talking like top shelf, or are we talking like bottom at the 7-Eleven in Cleveland?
No. The twist off cap.
I'm not judging.
But hey, no, we're talking top shelf.
I'd say bourbon, I think, was door number 2.
Yeah, door number 2 is bourbon.
Okay.
So bourbon?
Sure.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to it was just what's your preference? What would you pick up and drink? I mean, you could drink all 3, but that's for 20-year-olds who don't know any better.
That was never us.
No, I can't remember what that term is something about clear to dark and look out or something. I don't know. It's like whatever that is.
It's probably on the
internet. It's somewhere. All right, back to the serious stuff. So talk to me a little bit on this expectation things. You're the group commander and you've made a mistake. And maybe only 3 people see it. Maybe all 450 see it. What do you do? How do you handle that?
I think you have to recognize that you've made the mistake. And that could be something subtle of we didn't give somebody the right opportunity, or they didn't go to the upgrade, or it could be something big and catastrophic. I think the first thing you have to do is be honest with yourself and admit it. And whether you do that with yourself in your office or you have a confidant. I had a wonderful deputy, former Army officer who came over to the Air Force, and a great chief. And they kind of were my blind spot monitors, and they would say, boss, we missed this one, and here's what happened. So I think you have to first of all, you have to identify it. Then you probably have to dig into some root cause, and then really I think depending on what you want to do with it and whether it's appropriate to share, is share it with your leaders and say, hey, look, I thought we were doing this, we wound up doing this. My fault. Here's what I learned from it, and I have the benefit of passing along that mistake and the lesson learned to the people that I'm leading. And I think that does a couple things, because it shows that you're human. You're not back to the robot of you will just do this. I mean, we've probably all seen leadership like that, and there's episodes of history that are replete with that. And then have a discussion about it. And then really just, take your licks and move on. And I'd say lastly, if you have to go to your 1 or 2 up to tell him or her going, hey, boss, check this out. Yeah, here's where we messed up. Here's what we're doing to fix it. And we're moving forward.
Right. It's funny. I'm just working with a young guy who's a leader of an organization that's probably total heads, I don't know, probably 46. Many of them are part-time, but that doesn't really matter. And he's got an assistant manager who just got out of control, and he started losing people, and he had a real problem there. So I was walking him through kind of how to handle this and whatnot. And we got it all done. He did interviews. He found all this stuff out. He's going to deal with this assistant manager that works for him. And so I said to him, I go, okay, what's next? And he goes, well, I don't know. I said, well, let me point out something. This got past you for 6 months. So what part of this do you own? You don't own any of what the assistant manager did. The part you own is that your ear was not close enough to the rail. What's going on in the group, right? So our next step now is to work with him to say, okay, how do I keep my ear to the rail? How do I make sure this doesn't happen? I mean, I can't make sure it doesn't happen, but how do I catch it on the front side instead of the back side when I have 1,000 hours of damage control to do? So I flew around a 2-star general in Korea a little bit, Tom, and I'll never forget, we were flying along in one of those outposts where there's 2 slick sleeve privates with binoculars that look north, and a radio and an M16. I don't know what the hell they were supposed to do if the hordes came over, but call on the radio, drop their M16s and run like hell, I assume. But it was one of these small outposts. And this guy was one of those, short, high energy generals. Let's land there. I want to talk to these kids, So we'd land. And of course, these poor kids see the red plate on the side of the Huey and 2 stars on it, and they're about to pee their pants, So I'll never forget. I asked him one time, I said, General, can I ask you a leadership question? He said, sure. I said, you stop and talk to just about anybody, but we have this thing in the Army about chain of command, and that, there's 14 links between you and that private. How are you not? It was a hard question to ask a general. He said, oh, no, that's a fair question. He's a fair question. He said, they're in my command. I can talk to anybody I want in my command anytime I want. They all work for me. What I won't do is give them an order, and I won't countermand an order unless it's just totally off the reservation. But he said, what I will do is, he said, I have 3 basic questions. And once he told me it was like, oh, yeah, I've heard him ask this. He said, are you getting your mail? Are you getting your food? And are you getting your pay? He said, for a young soldier, and this would be true, you take this example to a factory floor, right? There's probably 2 or 3 basic things that employees ought to be getting without question all the time. And if there's a problem with one of those, it indicates a problem somewhere else. And he goes, he said, what have I said when they said, having trouble with one of those 3? Go see your platoon sergeant. That's always the advice I give them. But then I'm on the phone with Colonel so-and-so going, this is the 3rd time I've heard this under your command. What the hell are you doing about it, right? And it was really just a really interesting lesson. It let him keep his ear to the rail and not break the chain of command. Did you have something similar you did in the group? I mean, it was even harder for you. My God, people are all over the place. They're flying missions. They're on leave. They're going to schools. They're going to here. How did you keep your ear to the rail in this group that you led?
Yeah, I would say it probably started, when I was the squadron commander, I was either home in a foreign country or getting ready to go back to that foreign country. So we kind of rotating. And so I rarely had the squadron home at all one time. And then when I went to the Air Force Academy, so there's cadets, and really what I did is I kind of kept, normal 7 to 5 hours, but then sometimes I would just go in because the cadets are doing all things different hours. I would sometimes go in at noon and stay till midnight because there would be only times where I would see them. And then really, I think with the group, when I was in the group command, the operational groups rather, I think, I got a chance to fly, but then there was things I would do. I would just go hang out with the guys and gals packing parachutes that were cleaning weapons, that were doing, loadmaster stuff on the back of a ramp, and really just kind of listen and pay attention, walk around. I had a car, so I was kind of driving around and doing all that sort of stuff. But one of the best ways to kind of see that is not be sneaky, but just somewhat, if you've got a staff or something like that, just kind of disappear. And I had this little game I played where I would just, I told my executive assistant, I said, hey, I'm just going to sneak out. I'm just going to drive around and go over to Squadron X. And I would probably go over to Squadron Y because they would call. They go, he's coming to Squadron X. Okay, well, I would go to Squadron Y or Z. And I would just kind of, walk around and just listen and observe. And I'm not spying. Because I think sometimes I wasn't spying to kind of put a finer point on that, but I also wanted just to meet the airman or the contractor or the civilian where they were and what they were dealing with. Because the higher you go in leadership, the more filters they're going to be that, the district, the regional, the district, the so on and so forth. As you climb up that ladder, they're going to put most likely a filter or a spin or a modifier on the information. And I found that you can really get to the hardest of problems of whether it's pay, whether it's childcare, whether it's upgrade, or whether it's something they were dealing with, divorce, sick kids, stuff like that. I can't solve a lot of their personal problems, but I could, make some inroads with our first sergeant or our support staff.
So you got out from behind your desk is what you're telling me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Changed it up.
It's interesting. I'll get an assignment from a client and they'll go, we're having problems with Bob or Fred or Susie or whoever, that doesn't matter who it is. And the complaint we're getting is that their employees never see them out on the plant floor, and they never see them out in the job site, or they're always behind their desk or something. And there's an absolute correlation to that, to some breakdown in their leadership when they're not willing to get up. Tom Peters made, I believe it was in the book In Search of Excellence, he made MBWA famous, Management by Walking Around. And there's an art form to it, right? And I teach people, when you do that, put it on your calendar as MBWA, which means when I leave my desk to do it, I don't take a task to give someone. I just go and be. And you were, what you were just describing is something Herb Keller, who started Southwest Airlines, used to do all the time. He'd just wind up in the warehouse. He'd wind up in the maintenance shop floor. He'd wind up on a flight and sit jump seat, and talk to the pilots and talk to the flight attendants and talk to the gate agents and check people in and sling bags. And of course, he's running a 15,000 employee company. He still found time to do that. And he said, I didn't find time to do it. I made time to do it. You don't find time. It's not laying around on the floor. You pick it up. You make it a priority. Yeah. And it sounds like.
And I think that's a lost art. I think, and I think it was John Maxwell who said, if you do more people work, there'll be less people work.
Yeah.
And that's, leadership by walk around, management by walking around. And really, one of my neighbors was the maintenance group commander. He had, out of a 5,000 person wing, so, a bunch of different groups, he had probably 2,500 of them. And so he had, he was the maintenance group. So he had young airmen fixing jets in the middle of the night all over the place. And he would do that exact same thing. He was just up all the time. He was checking things out because the maintenance never stopped. And really, he gave me a couple of skills to kind of use and stuff like that. And really, you're going to find when you get to that issue, you're going to find that whether it's in the military or production floor, turning wrenches, making carpet, doesn't really matter. That, and I think you'll find out the key issues, but then also, I think you're able to tell that individual, whether they're day one on the job or day 1001, where they fit in the whole bigger picture of what they're doing. And moreover, Ned, why it's important to the mission, vision, and values of your organization.
So, and I want to wrap up with a couple things. You mentioned a couple times that you had a car and you'd go out and drive around. Now, in the Army, I don't know about the Air Force, but in the Army, once you got a bird on your collar, you were no longer allowed to touch a steering wheel because you were probably going to have an accident. So we supplied drivers to our colonels. Are you actually allowed to drive when you're a colonel in the Air Force, or did you get a driver?
No, it's the Air Force. We don't have. I was the driver.
I see. Okay.
but the cool thing was, I didn't own the airfield, so that was the different group. But you had to get checked out, and you had to pass a flight line driver's test, and you go over there.
Oh,
yeah, and I'll show you a little gift the guy gave him, and the airfield manager was his retired master sergeant. He's like, "All right, Colonel, check this out." He's like, "Sit down. You're taking my class." And I'm like,
and you're going to sit down and shut up and take the class.
Oh, yeah. Right. And he's like, all right. And then we're going to go out and you're going to show me what we just learned. And no kidding. I mean, he was deadly serious about it. And, so you're like, okay, call permission. He goes, that's not how you say it, sir. And I'm like, okay, all right. I'm just like, and I'm like, whatever the call sign was, permission to cross runway, whatever. He goes, that's much better. He goes, okay. And then he give me some scenarios. And he's like, sir, just remember, he goes, I know you're the colonel. You don't own the airfield. I run the airfield. So let's keep it that way. I'm like, and anyway, yeah, but it was great. And here's the so what. So as I was leaving, the tradition is when you give up command, stuff like that, they give you a gift. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a slice of the core of the runway.
Oh, cool.
That he gave me. And he turned it into, it's about an inch or so. And he turned it into basically it's one of the core samples. And he's like, hey, here you go. It's I put my hot drinks, cold drinks on it. So I always keep it on my desk as a reminder of that little story with him. And he just set the tenor and tone.
Yeah. Nice. Seriously. All right. So I need to finish up with a couple things here, Tom. What's the most embarrassing thing you've done that you had to just own?
Are we talking in the military?
Sure, I don't care. You've lived in and out of the military. I mean, you're a Golden Flash. You're a Kent State graduate. That is embarrassing in its own right. But.
Yeah, I know. But those records were sealed, Nels. Sealed.
You spent some time on Water Street. I know that. So, what's the most embarrassing thing anywhere?
Oh, boy. That's a good question. I'll take a pass and I'll think about that. I'll give you an answer at the end. I'll have to think.
Okay.
I don't know.
Really? Okay.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. And then last but not least, your favorite cuss word.
Favorite cuss word: supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Been thinking about that one.
Yeah. Seriously.
I think so. I think one of the most embarrassing things, if I recall correctly, I was doing an award ceremony, and the airman who I was giving the award to had a rather complex last name, and I just completely butchered it. And not only butchered it once, but I said Airman, Jones when it should have been Janes. And people, you were trying to read the audience. You're just like, and my chiefs over there like shut up. Yeah.
Shut up.
That's probably the best G-rated podcast, most embarrassing thing I can give you.
Well, no, I mean, sometimes the most embarrassing things are very G-rated. They don't have to be something horrible. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. I really appreciate it, and your friendship also. And keep up the good work, and I appreciate it, Tom. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me, Ned. I enjoyed our conversation.
All right. Thanks for listening in to the Value Bridge podcast. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
You have been listening to the Value Bridge podcast, a monthly 45 minutes or less of pithy, relevant, and helpful advice on everything business.